Welcome to Impacting Recovery Uncensored. I'm your host, Sarah Pritchard. This is a podcast where we dive deep into the real, uncensored truths about addiction, recovery, and everything in between. No sugarcoating, no judgment, just honest conversations that can help lift up the solution. So, let's get started. Today, I'm excited. We have two special guests. We have Dr. Dave Gore and Jake S with us. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
Very good. Thanks for having us.
Yes. Dave, I know you've been on a couple podcasts. Jake, have you ever done this before?
I have a few times.
Oh, good. Okay, so all veterans in here then. Most of the time, everyone's like, I've never done this before. Today, we're just going to kind of talk about sponsorship and helping other addicts and alcoholics in recovery and what that looks like. And I'm curious to know y'all's experience specifically around that, and maybe even specifically men, but also women too, obviously. But yeah, we can just kind of like dive into that and see where it goes. And I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people because there's just a lot of misconceptions out there, as I'm sure you guys both know, with years of sobriety. So I guess to give people a quick picture of how you both ended up in recovery, Dave, I'll start with you. We were talking about this earlier outside. You said 34 years ago you went to treatment. What pushed you, or what kind of, maybe just like a little snippet of your backstory on how you got here?
Quick version would be, I did not think I had a problem. I thought I was living a great life. I was high as a kite 95% of my waking hours, but I was a highly functioning individual. I had a PhD, I had my own practice, I had my own home, I had friends, and I thought I was doing just fine. The powerlessness I was aware of, the unmanageability I was not so much aware of. Long story short, I got confronted, I got discovered, I got told to go talk to an expert. I, of course, lied, cut a deal with that person. All I needed to do was just stay clean and sober for a year, and then they'd leave me alone. And I couldn't do that. And I ended up getting pushed against my will into rehab September 23rd, 1991. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want it. And my plan was just do whatever I could do to stay out of trouble and get my psychology license, unencumbered. And then I was going to go back to doing what I was always doing, which was living the best life I thought possible. They did something to me. Something happened.
Well, and I love that you mentioned you didn't want it, because we hear it all the time, just like being in the treatment world and families with impact of like, well, we can't have the conversation because they just don't want it yet. Or, they don't want it enough yet. And it sounds like you don't exactly have to want it right off the bat.
100%. And I would go even further and say most people that don't want it are not in a position to make an accurate judgment because their head is so far up there, that they can't see what their life really looks like.
Right.
So my humble opinion is everybody gets pushed in to recovery against their will at some level, be it a formal intervention, be it a job, be it a wife, be it a DUI, et cetera.
Yeah. And so then something shifted and you just kind of dove into this way of life.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yep.
And so did that did not lead into the field you're in, psychology?
I don't want to take time away from my friend here. Yeah. One of my pet peeves is most therapists that deal with addiction were accountants or lawyers or hairdressers. They get sober, they get filled with the spirit of helping people, and then they get whatever degree they could get quickly and become therapists, and their heart's in the right place, and they're really passionate, and they love recovery, but they're not good therapists. Mm-hmm. I'm the opposite. I was a pretty damn good therapist, and then I got sober, and now I'm a really good therapist trying to help people. And now I also have that passion, but I have a pretty solid foundation of helping people change, which is very hard to do.
Yes.
Because people don't want to change.
Yes. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit on that, on how we all are very resistant to change at times. Jake, so Dave is your sponsor.
He is. Yes.
How did y'all meet?
Just to give the frame of reference, I came in around 2016. I was similar to Dave in that I was, on paper, my career, everything was better than ever, as good as it could be at the age I was. But my life was rapidly deteriorating. It was kind of a house of cards that I felt was about to collapse at any moment. And I really hit a spiritual bankruptcy, which caused me, I would say 3 or 4 months prior to this moment, a friend of mine had said, if you ever want to stop, I know a meeting you can go to. And that's all he said. He didn't say, you really should go, or you need to go, or I'm concerned, because, he and I were partying together, pretty much every day. And he said, I know a meeting you could go to. And then 3 or 4 months later, after I got worse and worse and worse, I finally hit that spiritual bankruptcy moment. And I called him and I said, I'm ready to go to that meeting. And he said, okay, I'll meet you there. It was a Saturday morning meeting. So I'm sitting in the parking lot trying to call him, and his phone's off and he's hungover, presumably. And I had a choice. Do I go in or not? So I went in. It was a men's meeting. I knew from that meeting I was in the right place, because I had finally seen people who could not drink, not use, and be okay. That's all I wanted, was to be okay. And they were even more than okay. They were happy, laughing, joyous, and free. And I didn't, I don't really remember much of what anybody said, but I felt, okay, there's something here. There's hope.
Yeah.
And at that time, that same guy, he didn't go to that meeting, but he started coming again, because he had previously had some time in recovery. And I went to him again. I said, okay, time for a sponsor. Who do you think? Of course, in my mind at that point early on, I was looking to get what I could from recovery, get what I could from all the, these programs and these, and do it my way and try to hack it, because that was my mentality. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I said, I need to get, a really good sponsor. And he said, oh, okay, there's this other meeting up the road. It's
A higher end meeting.
Yeah, it's up the road, and there's this guy who's from New York. I'm from New York. He went to a really nice school, so you should go see him.
All the delusional things we think we need, and
Right.
and getting help.
I just wasn't gonna, start working with any guy. I needed to vet. I needed to find the guy.
Right.
So I went to that meeting, and that's how I met Dave for the first time. And I said, hey, I'm interested in, would you be interested in being my sponsor? And you want to take it from there?
Okay. What I heard is this guy, Rob, said to Jake, you're smart, he's smart, you should go talk to him, which is part of the delusion that smart people need each other.
Yeah.
And I would argue in AA, the smarter you are, the harder it is to get the program. And that guy that we're referencing, he should come on this podcast, because his superpower was he used to be high as a kite and 12-step people.
That's what I was thinking.
He used to be high as a kite and get people to go to meetings.
I was like, wait a minute. He said he used to party with him, but then he's telling you where to go and who to talk to.
And I'm not the only one. There's
He's done this.
Good recruiter.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So Jake comes up to me and says, my memory is I've been told to go talk to you, like you were ordered to go talk to me. And I said, dude, I'd love to talk to you, but my mom is dying. She was in a nursing home. It was getting towards the end. And I said, I just don't have the bandwidth to take anybody on right now, but here's my number. Call me in a month or two. And 98 out of 100 times when you do that to somebody, you're never going to hear from them.
Right.
And then about a month or two later, Jake called me up and said, hey, remember me? And I said, yep. And and then we met for
coffee.
I bragged about a car I was going to get, and just rolled his eyes and said, oh,
You did talk about the car there, that first meeting. Yeah.
So I guess with your recovery, you were going to meetings and stuff, but you didn't have a sponsor for a little bit there, and weren't.
No, yeah. For the first month or two, I had no sponsor. It wasn't that I didn't want one or was procrastinating.
Yeah.
I had asked Robert, who's the guy? And he said, this is the guy. And I, met you I said, okay, this is the guy.
Yeah.
And you said, call me in a month. So at that point, everything I was hearing was keep coming back, just do the next thing, take suggestions. So like, all right, I'll call him in a month.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because I'm just like thinking of like God's grace, like you having that time where you're not fully in like working a program yet, but yet you still were able, like you're still moving your feet, you're seeking, and you were safe and protected. It's over.
I was going to meetings,
Yeah.
and I was not using or drinking at that point.
And that's what a lot of people do. They go to meetings, they stop drinking and drugging, and they don't do the work. And the work would be the steps, getting a sponsor, working with others. And for a lot of people, that's okay. They just stay that way for years, which I don't get.
Right.
I don't get.
Me neither.
But then the better way to do it is to do some work.
I'm curious, like with both of y'all, your concept of like being in recovery and a sponsor and all these things, like that was such a foreign thing to me. And it almost was like where I was like, no, like I don't want to be a part of that. Like this is weird. Did you guys like have those misconceptions before going in or? Yeah,
I did. I mean, again, like my mentality was, I knew in concept what recovery was, what recovery programs and 12-step programs were. And, I had run my life as if I was my own higher power for so long. And everything had to happen. I had to make it happen. I had to figure it out. Okay. If there was something good, I had to figure out how to get whatever that was and do it better or hack it or find a better way. And that's how I was approaching AA, recovery.
Yeah.
So when I got in for a while there, my mentality was everything is good for these people, but I don't necessarily need to do it exactly like they do it.
Right.
I started building a bit in my head like, okay, the garden variety alcoholics or addicts need all this stuff. And, maybe I need it. Maybe I won't need it forever. And, I do remember I was with Dave at a retreat and there was a big speaker who came and said,
The Rock Eagle?
Yeah, Rock Eagle.
Oh, let's do a commercial for Rock Eagle.
Let's do one. The Atlanta Men's Workshop. It's twice a year.
March and October, 400 guys. And when you asked me to sponsor you, one of the things I said was, I have a requirement. I have like 17 requirements, but one of them was, I want you to go to one of these men's workshops. If you don't like it, you don't have to go back, but you can't not go.
Yeah.
So I interrupt. Go ahead.
Yes. So we were there. I did it. I was there. And I believe it was right after I did relapse once, and it was a brief, short relapse, and we can get into that if we want to. But after that was the Rock Eagle Men's Retreat, and we were there, and the speaker said something like, "You can't put recovery in the center of your life. You have to put your life in the center of recovery." And I looked at
someone said that to me yesterday for the first time.
Okay,
that is. Well, I guess I need to hear that.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, stop turking it around. You should step into recovery there.
Yeah.
And I heard that, and I turned to Dave, and I said, wow, that's some really cult stuff that he's spewing there. And Dave looked at me, and he said, no, you're exactly the person that needs to do that. You have to do that exactly. Because in my mind, I was like, oh, that's good for all those people, but I get it, I get it. And he said, no, you're the number one person who needs to actually do that if you really want to stay sober and do this thing long term.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, okay. And it has always stuck with me, and that's how I do things now.
Well, and it's funny that you're just saying like you're the type that you've got to figure it out, you got to hack it, you got to make it happen. Like that's the exact opposite of ours. Like we got to surrender. And so I'm curious, with Dave being a psychologist, were you like I feel like if my sponsor was, I'd be like, oh yes, like they'll tell me why I am the way I am. Free therapy, yeah. Were you like?
No, I'm a psychologist.
Yes, yeah. I mean, again, I went on Rob, my friend's recommendation, and then I met Dave, and I was like, okay, yes, he's a smart guy. I like his vibe.
Yeah.
And then I learned that he was a therapist, and then it was just an extra bonus. Certainly it helped, I was like, okay, I got to go with this guy.
Yeah.
Maybe if you weren't a therapist, I wouldn't have called you after a month.
Well, and part of what I do when I sponsor somebody is I'm super aware I can't not be a therapist. Like, it's just in me.
Yeah.
So I'll say something like, well, for example, Jake, you need to go to meetings more than you're going now.
Mm-hmm.
That's like me as a sponsor talking to you. Now, as a psychologist, I want to say to you, you're afraid to go to meetings because blah, 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 blah. So I try and draw a line and let them know the difference between what sponsorship and 12-step recovery looks like. And here's my 2 cents worth.
Yes.
Like, Jake, you got to deal with X, Y, or Z. You're not dealing with it. We got to, I then have to follow that up with, that's just me as your friend, or that's me as a therapist. I try and announce what I'm doing so that it's clear, because you could be a great sponsor and not have any training in being a therapist.
Yeah, for sure.
I would argue that intelligence makes it harder to be a member of 12-step recovery, and I would argue being a therapist makes it harder to be a member of 12-step recovery.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Well, and I was going to ask you that if it's hard to kind of separate that, but it sounds like you're very aware of it, and you're like, hey, I'm going to tell you this advice, and this is either sponsor or therapist. Yeah. And that's amazing.
Yeah, and I lose people. Like, there's a guy I used to sponsor that, his life was terrible, but he thought it was awesome, and he just was screwing up left and right. Mm-hmm. And then he gets his act together, and he starts dating like a drug addict. 4 or 5 Bumble dates a week. He starts working like a drug addict, 12, 14 hours. I'm like, dude, and I said, I don't want to sound like your therapist, but you need to learn some about, moderation. You going out with 4 women, that's not recovery.
Yeah.
That's insanity. What's going on?
I'm glad you brought that up, because for me, I just came here to stop drinking. I didn't think my whole life and perspective and belief systems and my behaviors and how I show up in life were going to change. And so it is interesting that there are people, and of course we can all go in and out of these not great behaviors or habits or whatever. But there's just so much more, because I thought you take the alcohol away from me and it was so uncomfortable. And that's why it was so unappealing for me to be sober, because when I didn't have it in my system, I could not exist. But luckily, it's so much more than that, to where, I'm not seeking external things. I'm not shopping. I'm not trying to date someone right away or this and that. And it's all about the internal condition. And so talking about this person, I see it with women I help too, of just trying to fill that hole almost without going all in on the internal work, and then all that external stuff just works itself out.
Well, what we're talking about here is, what's the issue? Is the issue we were drinking and doing drugs too much, or is the issue why were we drinking and doing drugs too much? What were we trying to avoid? Our core issue. Mm-hmm. I don't feel good enough, or I feel lonely, or I don't know how to do relationships, or I have sex addiction. Whatever we used to mask, you take it away, and most people's lives get bad.
Yeah.
They lost their best friend. They lost their coping mechanism. They lost their ability to, function on a daily basis. But as we talked about earlier, I'm always amazed when people just are miserable in AA. And there's a lot of people that are miserable in a 12-step fellowship. Mm-hmm. And again, I call it AA, but, put in your own words. And I'm well aware of the tradition of remaining anonymous at the level of press, radio, films, and podcasts. But, I keep on saying AA.
Yeah, well, I'm
going to name it.
Any recovery circles, there's lots out there.
And you have a choice, which is to dig in and work on your shit or not. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, Jake and I were talking about this in the car. There's some people that just, they keep it. They keep that bag of shit with them at all times. And we say, man, it smells, get rid of it. And they're like, yeah, you're right, I should. And they keep on carrying it. I'm like, isn't that heavy? Oh man, it's so heavy, my back hurt. Well, let go of it. No, there's a solution, but it takes work.
Yeah, I know. And I was talking about this earlier, the resistance that we see in people, and even in myself, because I relapsed as well, on just
Today?
not today,
Oh.
thank God. I was just so unwilling to do the work because it was uncomfortable. So I don't know. You mentioned like you relapsed and then you went to the men's retreat or whatever with carrying around your bag of stuff. Like for me, there were so many holes in my recovery. Like I'm surprised I didn't drink sooner, honestly. What was your experience like with that? And were you being honest? Because I was not.
I was not being honest to the extent that, again, my relapse was an edible, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
And the edible showed up on Monday, and it wasn't until Friday that I took the edible and
Then checked in.
And then I checked in, didn't say a word about it to my sponsor, Dave.
Of course.
Could you imagine him talking to me while high and not telling me he's high? Unbelievable.
Yeah. And then
I can imagine.
I got to a point where I felt bad about it, and I kind of figured I needed to come clean and be honest about it. So I did a call back and said, hey. And
Same day, right?
it was the same day. It was at night, like kind of late at night. I remember Dave said, okay, thanks for telling me. Go to a meeting tomorrow morning and pick up a, do your thing in recovery to
Up a white chip.
note that you have relapses, which I did. And, the one of the striking things about that was, it was one day. Okay. But, and it was one edible, but by the end of the day, I was still high, and I was like, oh, this is not good. I need, I wonder if that Corona is still in the fridge. And I think I still have that guy's number memorized that I can call. And it scared the crap out of me. I was like, no, I got to slow down. And I did. And I called Dave. But then the very next day, I wasn't high anymore, but I was acting like an addict again.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to my girlfriend. She's like, you're like somebody else right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sober again.
Mm-hmm.
Know that you.
She did. Yeah. I told her, and she was like, you're not acting the same right now. And I got to see it pretty quick and got back to the same meetings and same program. But I think for me, I wasn't all in spiritually or even really mentally. I was still doing the Jake program.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Dave said, you don't have to do recovery this way or any other way. You just can't do the Jake program anymore. But, you live 29 years on one program. You don't really know that there's anything else out there. And even when you see there is something else out there, it's hard to, let go of the Jake program.
Yeah.
And it's a process, agreed. But at that point, the first 4 or 5 months, I was still my own higher power.
Mm-hmm.
I had not, let go and let God at all yet.
It happens all the time. And it's sad because the delusion, like the alcoholic or the addict mind, is so insane. And but we're just, for my personal experience, like I was just, I could not get honest, and I could not see that I was like you. I was separate from, my situation's different, all these things. When I had a little taste of recovery, and I was like, I was doing a few things and got an experience around it, but then slowly but surely I stopped doing the action and like the disciplines that is required of me. And then before you know it, I'm sitting there being like, I'm not like them. And before I was like, these people saved my life. And it's just like the flip of a switch. And then the day I picked up, there wasn't a thought. I wasn't planning on drinking that day. And then a waitress looked at me and I was like, sure, I'll have a glass of wine. And it's like that strange mental blank spot of just like not thinking at all, or thinking it'll be fine when my experience shows it's not. And one key thing from my experience that I did not do was help other alcoholics. In that period of sobriety, I had like almost a year sober to the day. And it was instilled in me, like, you got to sponsor other women. You got to help other people. And I'm like, yeah. Look at me. My life needs help, And so when I relapsed, it was like for a week, I knew with everything in me, like I had to do that. And now it's like a part of my life and the way I live. But I think this sometimes gets lost. Like, I'm so glad you were like, you know what? I'm going to bring Jake.
The actual story is you and I were texting were talking about the podcast.
Yeah.
And he called me while we were talking.
Yeah.
I said, what do did I ask you then?
Yes, you were
I said, what do you think about bringing a sponsee? And you're like, that would be cool. And then when I called him back, I said, and so it was, look, there's all kinds of ways to do this, but I think to have a sponsor and to sponsor somebody is pretty much the best way to do it. Just one is not enough. Both are better. And then there's a lot of poor schmoes walking around with zero. I have 2 guys I sponsor, Jake and somebody else. Ask Jake how many guys he sponsors.
How many?
Right now, 5.
See, he's got more free time than me. I'm very busy, very important. He's got nothing but time. So he could, and his guys are new and young. If you're 20, how old is the youngest guy?
Youngest guy is 27.
You're 27, you don't want a 66-year-old sponsor. I know I look like I'm 40, but you don't want you want a young guy, and they take time. Again, in our car ride here when the podcast first, started, which was an hour ago from Jake and I, with no cameras going, he's afraid when these guys screw up that they're going to drink or do drugs. I'm afraid when Jake screws up, he's going to be miserable. I don't think he's going to relapse. Now, that's false. There is always a chance. The other guy's sponsor has 15 years. When he screws up, I don't think he's going to use, but I know he's not a happy dude.
Yeah.
So my goal for these guys is to have a great life. His goal is for them to have a great life, but it starts with them not putting any chemicals in their body, which is a struggle for some of them, plus the whole cross addiction thing.
Yeah.
Some of these guys are still messing around with stuff they shouldn't be messing around with. So I'll just shut up. So he has 5, which is a lot.
Incredible, yes. And maybe y'all both can speak to this, but my willingness hasn't left me since that day I woke up in the hospital. And so
After the waitress with the wine?
Yeah.
How many days later?
It was about 5 or 6.
You went on a binge.
Yes.
Maybe you have a problem with drugs and alcohol?
I think so. Yes. I'm very qualified.
So you woke up in regular hospital or a psych ward?
This last time it was just a regular hospital. I've woken up in the psych ward before, said some things that I didn't mean, and then I was just being dramatic, and I didn't know they could lock you up, and they did, and it was a place that they made you take your shoelaces out of your shoes and plastic mirrors, and I'm like, oh, my family, get me out of here. They're like, we're trying. And I'm not making light of that at all, but that was just not my experience, and I just had no idea. But yeah, woke up in just a hospital for alcohol poisoning, essentially, and shocked that I was there. That was not my intention to end up in the hospital. As I'm sure it was not your intention when you woke up the next day being like, or thinking about, the phone numbers and the corona, it just happens.
The temporary amnesia, momentary amnesia of everything that has ever happened in my life when I pick up, use, drink, and even all the work that I did to, start a recovery program.
Yeah.
It all just momentarily, it's as if it had never happened.
Was it hard for you to walk back in and pick up again?
It was hard, but I'm glad I did it the very next morning.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I was talking to somebody yesterday. So you relapsed for a day. I relapsed for a week. He relapsed for 2.5 years. And he said he would sit outside in his car at meetings and he could not go in. His ego wouldn't let him go in. And I feel obviously with women, but I feel like with men even more, somebody that may have time or has been around, it's almost harder when in reality they walk in, you're like, thank God, welcome back. We're so happy to see you. And so it's just, I don't know if you guys have seen that or if that's just, I don't know. But I was like, that's really sad that he was sitting out there for years and couldn't go in.
He would not enter the room.
No.
That's kind of a weird story. I could see doing that once or twice.
Yeah.
For years.
Or, well, I don't know how many times he did it. But
just speaking for myself, the whole chip system, which we tend to do in most meetings, if not all meetings, I think it's powerful because the closest I ever came to relapse, and I started thinking about what would it be like picking up a white chip? How much shame would I feel? And the answer was a lot of shame.
Yeah.
The next thing I thought was, well, maybe I just won't tell anybody. And then I started thinking about that. And then I started thinking about, well, I'll just wait, a year, pick up a year chip. And most people are not tracking Dave Gore's time. Like they won't really, so I'll just, and then I started, and the next thing you know, I'm saying to myself, maybe I need to be thinking about something else. If this is such a big deal, maybe I'm making a shitty choice here.
And I mean, now I'm just like thinking of this. I remember because I was like super close to the day when I drank again, that was a year. And I remember thinking a little before that, like, I almost didn't want to go pick up a year chip because I was like, I'm so far from the community that like I feel guilty because I'm like not doing enough.
Oh, I love when people pick up a 5-year chip and say, I don't go to meetings anymore.
Yeah.
I'm such a big fan of that.
I don't know. Everyone just has their own experience, and I'm glad we're talking about it because there's not a box that, we all fit in with our external circumstances, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like you didn't go to treatment. You did go to treatment. Some people get arrested. Some people don't. Some people are homeless. Some people aren't. It just, but the solution works for everybody.
I mean, my problem is I think I know what the box should look like and how big it should be and what it should be made out of, how strongly to seal it or keep it loose.
To address, the topic of people feeling reticent coming back to pick up another chip or coming back after a relapse, I think for a lot of people, recovery is a lot of different things. There's program, there's the fellowship, there's the meetings, there's the network, there's service.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's all of that stuff, but at the foundation of it, it is a program. That's why, when people start to overemphasize the group or the meeting or the network or the friends or the relationships, I think even Dave at one point said, look, any one person in recovery can let you down. All right. But the program is not going to let you down.
Damn, that was smart. I said that?
You said that. Anytime I think of something that I didn't come up with, I always just attribute it to you anyway. So there's a good chance you said it, but
I don't think I said that.
Yeah, that's so true. And, our text talks about helping others, but which is important, like the service piece and like making coffee at the meetings, which is, whatever. But it also talks about intensive work with other alcoholics. And I would love to hear y'all's experience, like on what that does for your own recovery when you're sponsoring someone else. Because the truth is, for me, it as the book says, it a lot of times helps me more than it helps them. And it's like the bright spot in my life of actually being able to use my biggest liability and turn it into an asset, something I was so like ashamed of. Dave, do you have like it?
Everything you say leads to 5 or 10 thoughts, but I'm not sharing everything that's coming out of my brain because it's not about sponsorship. But you said the irony is the more you work with others, the more you get. And that's one of the secrets of this program is when we sponsor somebody, it looks like I'm helping him. But and I know, and now Jake knows, I get a lot out of it, if not more, by sponsoring. And you could say that. And if anybody's sitting at home that's sober, not working a program, they don't know what the hell I just said. They can't understand that. But when you go up to somebody and ask to, hey, would you sponsor me? You're giving that person a gift, all right? And the second irony of this program, among the 400 ironies, is I heard a guy talk about when he was using, and I like drugs more than alcohol, by the way. He used to talk about the purity of the product. Like they used to spend a lot of time and energy on what they were purchasing, the quality of what they were purchasing. And in our world of addicts, there's something called tolerance, which is we need more of something to get the effect we used to get.
Right.
And he goes with AA, it's the opposite. It's a reverse tolerance. The longer time we have, the more we put into this program, the more we get back. It's a juxtaposition.
Yeah.
It's easier to get more out of this program the more you do, the longer you're in.
Yeah.
So I find that pretty amazing. And again, these are words. If you got to experience it to believe it. You know what I'm talking about. I think you do too.
Yeah. Well, and like I miss this because we learn that like selfishness and self-centeredness is the problem. So wouldn't I do the opposite of that? Like help others get out of self. But I mean, again, it's like my life is busy. I'm getting all these gifts of recovery. I don't have time. It's like the only reason I don't have time is because of recovery.
Yeah,
and
I don't get that.
yeah. So,
Like our mutual friend Kelly once said something to me, which I heard as a compliment, but it's not. She said, "You're the busiest guy I know." And I'm like, "Oh, I love that. I'm so busy." But it's bullshit because I am busy. But that's not a compliment. I was raising children. I had my own practice, my own business. I was doing something. I was doing this. I was a sandwich generation kid. I was taking care of my elderly mother while I had, 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds. But I never let off the gas when it comes to this program. No matter how busy I was, I made it to X number of meetings. Sometimes it would be 1 or 2 a month. Sometimes it would be 1 or 2 a week. Mm-hmm. But I never let that go. And I was in a meeting Wednesday in our high-end fancy, lunch meeting that we go to. And this woman said, COVID, relapse. COVID was hard. It's like, whoa, that's the worst reason in the world to relapse. COVID. Because all of a sudden everybody just sits on their buttons, and has Zoom meetings, which were not great, but they're better than nothing.
Right.
So Did you relapse during COVID?
I did not. Yeah.
Yeah. Me neither.
Because I'm an alcoholic and an addict, I got real excited when COVID happened. Anytime something weird happens, I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, on the other hand, there was a COVID year, New Year's Eve. I was sitting in my basement because a friend asked me to join a meeting, and I'm on a Zoom meeting New Year's Eve, and I'm feeling sorry for myself. Like, this is my life in recovery. But by the end of the meeting, it was like, there wasn't a better way I could have spent that New Year's Eve than, being on a Zoom meeting with a recovery group, because I knew the next day I was going to wake up and be good, which I did. I went to another in-person meeting on New Year's Day, and I'll never forget, a really large man went to pick up a white chip, and right after he took the white chip, he just fell flat on his face because he was so hungover or still on. And I was like, okay. I mean, he was okay. He didn't, wasn't serious, but it was like, okay, this is, and I thought to myself, that could be me. That could be me.
Thinner.
Yeah, small. He was a big guy.
Did he stay with the meetings?
I have no idea. I never saw the guy again.
That's the sad part of this program is people come in and we never see them again. We don't know how they do, but the story doesn't tend to turn out too well.
I'm glad you brought up how, our lives change as we get sober and the gifts of sobriety come in. Things change. And so, sometimes I can go to a certain number of meetings and sometimes I'm not going to as many. But I think the important thing for me is, one, the sponsorship has not swayed. After I relapsed, my sponsor was like, we're going to go through these steps really quick because you can't think about you for too long before you get drunk. And I'm like, okay. So we went through the work in 60 days and I was sponsoring women and I was scared to death. Didn't know what I was doing. I was going to, we were at a sober living book study and I was going with my sponsor and someone came up and was like to her, was like, can you sponsor, or do you know someone like her or like you that can sponsor? She was like, I sure do. She's right here. But that's that regardless of what's going on in my life, I've always stuck with that. I've always consistently worked with other women because for me, it's when I'm helping hopefully get another woman connected to this power that's going to remove the obsession to drink and use. I'm telling her to do things. And if I'm not doing it, it's like a reflection on me. I'm like, okay, you need to pray and meditate, or you need to go to a meeting, or what. And I'm like, oh, I actually need to go to a meeting, or I actually need to, look at my morning routine, or I need to. And so it keeps me so current, and it keeps me you touched on it, like the guy that fell at the meeting, you're like, that could be me. It keeps me very aware and clear that I am her And that could be, I don't ever want to be a day sober again. That's the worst thing ever. And so there's just so many benefits from it. And then I always leave lighter, even if I don't want to necessarily go listen to a fifth step on a Saturday morning about her ex-boyfriends and family and mine didn't either, but I always leave lighter. And so I think that's just something that I missed, even though it was told to me over and over. And I heard the speaker, I don't know if you guys have ever heard Don Pritz. He passed away a long time ago, but he was like a big speaker. But he said addicts and alcoholics need to be useful. So he didn't say we want to be useful, we should be useful. It said we need to be useful.
Then I heard you say earlier you didn't know how to sponsor women. And the answer is you call your sponsor up and say, little Susie here has this, I don't know what to tell her. And then she helps you.
Yes.
And I talk to my sponsor.
Yeah.
And say, what do I do with Jake? Or what do I do with Jake's sponsee? And he and I talk. And I think one of the secrets is none of us know what the hell we're doing, but we try and figure it out together. And as long as we're looking at each other and asking questions and trying to do the right thing, things tend to, the advice we give tends to be good advice.
I heard someone say one time, like the sponsor, it doesn't have to be this perfect way of, sharing the program or whatever. Like if both are actively seeking wholeheartedly, like God picks up a lot of the slack and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience. So were you nervous the first time you picked up your first sponsee?
First sponsee.
Probably didn't stick around.
I wouldn't say I was nervous. I was actually, again, this is definitely my ego, but it was like, okay, finally somebody's going to benefit from my wisdom and my putting this great program together. Like I definitely approached the first sponsee with ego, I wasn't over the top guru style, but I definitely shaded that way. Definitely gave more advice than I needed to. Went a little bit above and beyond and outside the scope of the 12 steps. I was sober working a program, but I was still in the very early stages of emotional sobriety.
Yeah.
And that was a long process for me. It's still going on, but I think I took a lot more time work than I appreciated at the time. So I got a younger guy than me, and I was like, okay, let me mold this guy. And
is he still with you?
He's
first guy.
The first guy. He's a guy. He's now he's still in the program, but he at that time I was so emotionally unsober. I was like, oh, okay, I need to change my whole life, shut down everything, break up everything and everything, hit the road, put all my stuff in my car, hit the road, travel the world, and I was running away from my life, from an emotional sobriety standpoint, definitely getting farther and farther from sobriety.
Yeah.
And I got as far as New York, and I called Dave and I said, hey, I think I need to do a fourth step or a fifth step with you. And but part of that process was I broke up with the sponsor. I said, I can't sponsor you anymore. I have to hit the road and follow God's word. God's telling me to, upend my life and do what I am telling God is telling me to do. Something like that.
I know who he's talking about now. I have many people walking around that I used to sponsor. They don't sponsor anymore because I used to do stuff like say, you must go to Rock Eagle, the AA men's retreat, just once.
Yeah.
Call me every day for a couple weeks or call me twice a week. And I got guys that I still have relationships with that I'm friends with that I don't sponsor because I was kind of a hard-ass sponsor. Like 2 guys that I'm thinking of could not call me once a week. And after months of me saying, if you don't call me once a week, I'm going to fire you. And them saying, you're right, I'll do better. And then them not doing, I fired them. Today, I have a guy that I sponsor who doesn't call me much. And I would have fired him, but my current sponsor, who I've had for the last year or so, he's like, dude, let him be. So that's a whole new thing. And because I'm willing to listen, I'm trying to let people be. So there's like, I'd have 20 guys that I'd sponsor now if I was more laissez-faire.
Yeah.
I'm not. I think Jake is more laissez-faire, but he's also got a little bit of a hard ass. You got some requirements, but we were talking about what do you do with these guys that keep on suffering? What was your metaphor? They're walking around with
A rock in the shoe.
rock in their shoe, not a pebble, a rock.
Couple, rock.
Yeah, for sure.
It's certain if you watch them walking down the street, you would see, hey, what's up with your gait there, buddy?
Yeah.
And there's a rock in the shoe.
Yeah.
And just like
They say, I'm fine.
no, like a lot of them will say, yeah, I got this crazy rock in the shoe. It's horrible, and it's still in the shoe. I mean, I'm guilty as charged. I think that we were talking about this earlier. It's like, okay, we take them through the 12 steps. We help get on a path of emotional sobriety, being a better man, a better husband, a better worker, a better parent. And then it's like, okay, we still got one or two rocks in our shoes. Mm-hmm. And it's complicated, it's messy, it involves relationships. It's not something you can just...
It almost always involves relationships.
Yeah, it's not something you can just quit, or if you do just quit it, there's, it's going to be a very turbulent, complicated thing. And it's like, or it's something where, 99% of the time we're living God's will, but this is the 1% where we know we're playing the director. And I say, hey, buddy, you need to ask yourself, are you playing the director now?
Yeah.
And it's hard to let go.
Yeah. If you're like, hey, call me once a week or call me every day at this time, and they're not doing it, it shows their level of willingness. So it's like the book talks about, like, there are plenty of people that want the help. And so for me, it's like, if you're not going to be able to just do this simple task of calling me when I ask you at that time, then you're not going to be willing to write inventory. You're not be willing to do your amends. And that could be taken away from somebody that's out there that needs help. But yeah, it gets tricky with that kind of stuff. Well, is there anything else that you guys wanted to share on? I think this was a really good conversation. I enjoyed it.
I'll go first so Dave can formulate the last word. But I think the one other thing I'd share about sponsorship, or two other things I'd share, at the end of the day, the sponsor's job is to take the person through the recovery program, whatever that is, whether it's 12 steps or something else. And sometimes I lose sight of that, but I'm at the point now where I've done it enough and long enough that I can sense when I'm getting away from that, and I recircle myself. Okay, what step am I on with this guy? What step are we on? And if I ask somebody, like, Dave will do this, what step are you on? If there's any hesitation, you're not really working the program. So on any given guy, I got to know what step am I on. There was a second thing I was going to say, but
I'll talk and then you could get the last word in. When I went to rehab, it feels like yesterday. Again, I walked in not willing, but there was this one drug counselor who I just learned so much from, and I've tried to find him, and no one could find him. And one of the things he used to do is say, how many of you relapsed? And people would raise their hand, and he'd say, the day you relapsed, did you go to a meeting? Were you actively working on a step? And did you ask your higher power to keep you sober? And of course, the answer is, I did none of those things or only one of those things. And he says, I've asked this question to 10,000 people, and no one said they did all those things and still relapsed. And you notice, call your sponsor is not one of those things, right? We have this program, and if you're working a step, you're working a step. So when I see you and I say, what step are you working on? And you go, whatever you're about to tell me is not true, right? Because I'm pretty plugged into the treatment industry and I'm ethical, I don't take kickbacks, but I get offered really nice things. Like I'll get a tin of nuts for Christmas, that have chocolate and cinnamon,
Delicious.
$20, $30, but hey, I'll take it. That's the extent of how we get thanked. Well, one guy called me up from a treatment center and he said, we're doing this brick thing, to raise money. People are paying money to get these bricks put out. We're going to have like a 12-step path, a serenity path, something like that. He goes, as our thanks to you for being somebody who was referred to us, we're going to give you 5 bricks. And I go, cool. And I hit the link, and I'm limited to how many characters I could put on each brick. So I come up with, I like that challenge. I try, and after like 3 or 4, I felt like, okay, this is not fun anymore. And I call up Jake. I said, Jake, I have a present for you. I'm going to give you this gift of this brick. You come up with it. Here's the rules. It's like 17 characters per line, 3 lines, whatever it was. I don't know how quickly he came back, but what he came back with was brilliant. He said, figure it out is not one of the steps. Is that accurate?
Yes.
I love that.
And I love that too. For smart people like the 3 of us, that's a really dangerous thing. So when you have a debate with somebody about, do you have a sponsor? Are you sponsoring somebody? Have you worked the steps? Are you working the steps? And they start wanting to argue with you. At that point, it's like, okay, we could argue, but you're doing it your way. Your way worked about as well as your life is now. Why don't you try our way? Right. And that's what it comes down to. Your best thinking got you here. Now try our way, which we say all day, every day in treatment centers, right? But people really like doing things my way. Mm-hmm. And the whole program is about not doing that. And I think sponsorship is one of the fulcrums, the hinges of that. Did you?
Last word to the high.
I may come back. I don't know.
All right. I'll tee it up for you, but I think the last word goes to my higher power. I was talking to one of my sponsees last night, telling him, hey, I'm doing this thing tomorrow. And I told him, I said, sometimes I wonder, am I being a good sponsor to you with some of the rocks in the shoe? And he said, well, I don't know if this means yes or no, but he said the one thing that does seem helpful for me is you always bring it back to what's your relationship with your higher power. Are you praying about it? Are you in communication with your higher power about the rock in the shoe, or what you're doing about it or not doing about it? And it made me feel really good. It was a nice touching moment, and I said, okay, well, good. I guess I need to keep doing that. And because that's really what the program is about. It's a spiritual program, recovery. And, if I don't have any brilliant things or tactics or strategies, I can always just say, well, check in with your higher. I don't have anything for you right now, but check in with your higher power. He may have something for you.
Jake and I are friends. That's not that uncommon, but it's not necessary. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be friends with your sponsor or someone you sponsor, but that clearly is us. And there's also a father-son thing going on. He literally was born the day after one of my kids was born. All right. And there's a lot to be said for men needing other men.
And I also lost my father when I was 9 years old.
I tell people it was 8. You sure it was not 8?
8 or 9.
Which one was it?
Now you're making me wonder.
Question.
Is either 8 or 9, right around that age.
This is off topic, but it's on topic. We go to the AA Men's Retreat, which any male listening should go to. Husband.
Yes.
Any men you have to be married to should go to. Any partners and Williams Grant consulting agency should go.
Yes.
And they used to do this thing where the head guy, who's passed away because he was a fat smoker who never took care of himself, not that I'm going to judge him or anything, great guy, he used to say, let me tell you guys, where I'm from. He says in 1930-something, a guy named Bill Wilson met a guy named Dr. Bob, and he tells a 20, 30-second story about the birth of AA. He goes, Bill used to sponsor a guy, I'm going to make up his name. Bill sponsors a guy named James. James sponsors a guy named Bruce. Bruce was a traveling salesman. He ended up sponsoring Earl. Earl was my great sponsor. So the guy that sponsors me was sponsored by Earl. My sponsor is Doc. Is anybody here sponsored by a guy named Doc? A couple of people stand up. If any of you are sponsored by one of us, stand up.
Yeah.
If any of you are sponsored by, and next thing you know, half the auditorium is standing up. And the beautiful feeling of having our lineage traced back to the founders of this 12-step program was something I wanted. So I immediately said, I want to be one of those guys that gets to stand up. And I went to my then sponsor, a arrogant attorney, believe it or not. And I said, look, I want you to just go with me to this thing. It's really special. He's like, nope, too busy. And that was the end of he and I. And I got somebody in that, and I'm not part of that lineage anymore, but it's okay. We're wired to connect across generations. And I think sponsorship is a generational thing. There are some people that get sponsored by people younger than them. And there's some people that get sponsored by people with less time than them. And that all could work. And by the way, we try to keep it gender, specific. But, if you're gay and you want to have a same-sex sponsor, cool, or go across. And, if you're a gay man, you want to be sponsored by a woman, fine. But generally speaking, it's for us, it's a man sponsoring a man, sponsors a man. And that's just powerful stuff, And for those of you that don't feel like you're friends with your sponsor, that's okay too. I like it. But, and the last thing I want to say, and then when I first met Jake, he met my kids, and he's grown up with my kids. So so my boy was 10, my girl was 8. He doesn't know anything about kids. And he liked my kids. My kids think he's, cool as shit. And Jake had a hoverboard that he wasn't using. He goes, would you like the hoverboard? I'm like, of course I want the hoverboard. So for a few weeks, my kids and me, we'd do the hoverboard. And then a month or two later, we both liked basketball. And Jake, he said to me, do you want to go to a playoff game? And I said, sure, where? He goes, I don't know. So he and I ended up going to Houston for a playoff game against, it was
Game 7, Rockets Warriors.
There you go, which was really cool. And I said, oh, this guy's awesome. Like, Jake, my new sponsee, he's going to be giving me gifts. He's going to be taking me to basketball. He's never given me anything since then. He's never taken me to one game since then.
Unbelievable. That is hilarious. Well, this was great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I think it's going to help a lot of people and just, give some knowledge and language around what this is. And maybe hopefully smash some misconceptions there too. But yes, thank you guys again. And thank you for tuning in to another episode. I hope today's conversation has inspired you, opened your mind, maybe even your heart a little bit. But remember, you're not alone. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll have all the links below so you can find us. But until next time, keep making an impact. Bye, y'all.